Have you ever looked at someone and seen only their uniform, their job, their station in life? Have you ever dismissed them, only to discover that you were looking at the one person who held the key to everything you were searching for? Our story begins in a place where value is measured in dollars and status, a place where some people are designed to be seen, and others, to be invisible. But sometimes, in the quietest corners of the world, a hidden brilliance waits for just one person to have the courage to look closer. This is a story about what happens when they finally do. The restaurant was called Aurelia, a name that whispered of gold and old money. Its interior was a symphony of muted tones, charcoal gray walls, polished marble floors, and lighting so artfully dim it seemed to cast everyone in a permanent, flattering twilight. Here, conversations were murmurs, laughter was a restrained tinkle of crystal, and the clinking of cutlery was the only percussion in a slow, deliberate ballet of wealth. At the center of this opulent stage sat Seraphina Vance, a woman who looked as though she were carved from the same expensive marble as the floor. Her blonde hair was swept into a severe but elegant chignon, her suit was a sharp slash of ivory against the dark decor, and the diamond on her finger caught the low light and fractured it into 1,000 tiny, cold stars. She was not dining, she was holding court, with her phone pressed to her ear like a weapon. Her voice, though low, was a blade. "No, Richard, that's not what I'm paying you for," she hissed, her eyes scanning the room with a predatory boredom. "I'm paying for a vision, not a focus-grouped, beige-colored echo of our competitors. Vance's legacy is dying on the vine, and you're bringing me water in a thimble." On the other end of the line, a man's voice placated, explained, and excused. Seraphina's jaw tightened. Her family's company, a beacon of luxury goods for 3 generations, was losing its light. It had become stagnant, a relic. The world had moved on, and Vance's legacy was being left behind, a beautiful ship taking on water in a sea of fresh, agile competitors. She felt the weight of her grandfather's portrait, which hung in the boardroom, its painted eyes seeming to follow her with a silent, heavy disappointment. He had built an empire on a story, a soul. She was presiding over its meticulously managed decline. Moving between the tables, a ghost in a simple black uniform, was Elara. She was the kind of person you looked through, not at. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, her face was often tilted slightly downward, her focus entirely on her tasks, clearing a plate, refilling a glass, replacing a fallen napkin. She moved with a practiced, silent efficiency that made her part of the restaurant's machinery, as functional and unnoticed as the air conditioning. But her eyes, when she allowed them to lift, missed nothing. She saw the nervous tic in the young man on a first date, the weary slump in the shoulders of the businessman celebrating a hollow victory, and the deep, corrosive anxiety radiating from the woman in the ivory suit, Seraphina Vance. Elara knew her type. They came here not to eat, but to be seen eating. They consumed status, not food. And they treated the staff as invisible hands, extensions of the tables and chairs. Elara didn't resent it, she simply observed it. It was a role she played to survive. Her real life, her real self, was tucked away in a small, worn sketchbook she kept in her locker, a world of lines and colors and ideas that felt more real than the polished charade of Aurelia. The tension at Seraphina's table was a palpable thing, a crackle in the air. As Elara approached to refill her water glass, Seraphina gestured impatiently with a sweep of her hand, her focus still locked on the disastrous phone call. The back of her hand connected with the tall, slender stem of her wine glass. Time seemed to slow. The deep crimson liquid arced through the air, a beautiful, terrible wave, before splashing across a stack of pristine white documents on the table, the very brand briefs Seraphina had been agonizing over. A dark, ugly stain bloomed across the pages, bleeding into the crisp logos and sterile mission statements. The phone call ended abruptly. A sharp, furious silence descended on the table. Seraphina stared at the ruined papers, her face a mask of disbelief that quickly hardened into rage. Her gaze snapped up, not to the accident itself, but to find a target for the storm of frustration that had been brewing inside her all day. Her eyes landed on Elara, who was already moving forward with a clean cloth, her expression calm, her movements swift. "Don't just stand there!" Serafina's voice was a whip crack in the quiet restaurant. Heads turned. The murmurs ceased. "Just clean it up! My God, can't you people do anything right?" The words, "you people," hung in the air, thick and poisonous. They were meant to sting, to diminish, to draw a line between Serafina's world and Ilara's. Ilara froze for a fraction of a second, the insult landing like a physical blow. She felt the familiar heat of shame rise in her cheeks, the instinct to shrink, to become even more invisible. But then, something else took over, a quiet, unyielding dignity that was her last line of defense. She met Serafina's furious gaze, her own eyes clear and steady. She said nothing. Her silence was more powerful than any apology or excuse could have been. Marcus, the restaurant manager, scurried over, his face a mess of panicked obsequiousness. "Ms. Vance, I am so terribly sorry! So sorry! This is unacceptable! Maria, what are you doing?" He turned on Ilara, his voice dripping with condescension, eager to perform for his wealthy clientele. "Be more careful! Apologize to Ms. Vance immediately." Ilara ignored him. Her focus was on the task. She carefully gathered the soaked papers, her movements gentle, as if she were handling something precious. As she did, her eyes fell upon the details now smeared with wine. She saw the familiar, dated VL monogram, the lifeless taglines, the charts showing declining engagement. She didn't just see a mess, she saw the problem. She saw a story that had lost its voice. She understood, in that instant, the source of the fury in the woman's eyes. It wasn't about the spilled wine. It was about the spilled legacy. With quiet efficiency, she wiped the table clean, replaced the coaster, and set down a fresh glass, all without a single word. Then she turned and walked away, carrying the ruined documents with her, leaving Serafina Vance sitting in a pool of stunned, simmering silence, the echo of her own cruelty tasting bitter in her mouth. The break room was a cramped, windowless space in the restaurant's basement, smelling perpetually of bleach and old coffee. It was Ilara's sanctuary. While other staff members scrolled through their phones or complained about demanding customers, Ilara would retreat to a corner with her worn, dog-eared sketchbook. This small book was her entire world. It was the repository of her dreams, the place where the invisible waitress became a creator. The pages were filled with intricate designs, logos for fictional companies, architectural sketches of impossible buildings, and character portraits so vivid they seemed ready to speak. This was the talent she nurtured in the shadows, the gift she had been forced to set aside. Years ago, she had won a prestigious scholarship to the best design school in the country. It was her ticket out, her chance to build a life from the beauty she saw in her mind. But weeks before she was due to leave, her younger brother, Leo, a gifted painter in his own right, was diagnosed with a rare degenerative illness. The medical bills were astronomical, and their family had nothing. Without a second thought, Ilara had walked away from her scholarship. She took the first job she could find that offered steady hours, and then a second. She became a waitress, a cleaner, a ghost in the service industry, funneling every spare dollar toward Leo's treatments and, more importantly, to ensure he could still afford his own art supplies. His passion, his fire, could not be allowed to go out. So she worked, and in the stolen moments in basement break rooms she drew. Tonight, however, she wasn't drawing for herself. She couldn't shake the image of the wine-stained documents, of the soulless, corporate branding of Vance's legacy. She had seen the company's products in magazines. They were beautiful but cold, technically perfect but emotionally vacant. They were like the woman herself. On a fresh page, her pencil began to move. It was not a conscious decision, it was an instinct. She didn't think about marketing or demographics. She thought about the name, legacy. What did it mean? It meant a story passed down. It meant roots. Her pencil sketched the letter V, but it wasn't the sharp, aggressive V of the current logo. Her V was formed from the stylized trunk of an old, strong tree. Then came the L, its form emerging from the elegant, sweeping branches of that same tree. The two letters intertwined, a symbol of strength and growth, of heritage and future. It was classic yet modern, simple yet profound. It told a story in a single glance. It had everything the current brand was missing, a heart. She worked feverishly, the world of Aurelia fading away, replaced by the pure, focused joy of creation. She sketched variations, mock-ups on letterheads, on perfume bottles, on the clasp of a handbag. A whole world bloomed from that single idea. It was alive. It was the truth of the brand, a truth its own CEO couldn't see. She felt a pang of empathy for the angry woman upstairs. To be the guardian of something so beautiful and to not know how to save it must be a terrible kind of prison. When her break was over, she gently tore the single page with the primary logo design from her sketchbook, folded it carefully, and slipped it into her apron pocket. It was a foolish, impulsive gesture. But something told her it was the right one. Serafina Vance sat in the back of her chauffeured town car, the city lights blurring into streaks of gold and silver through the tinted window. The guilt from her outburst had settled into a cold, hard knot in her stomach. She wasn't a cruel person, not usually. She was stressed, she was at her breaking point, but that was no excuse. The waitress's eyes, so calm and dignified in the face of her tirade, haunted her. They hadn't been fearful or angry, they had been knowing. It was unsettling. Her phone buzzed again. It was Richard, her head of marketing, with another useless platitude. She declined the call and tossed the phone onto the seat beside her. She felt utterly alone. She was surrounded by yes-men and corporate sycophants, all drawing enormous salaries to tell her what she wanted to hear, none of them capable of giving her the one thing she desperately needed, an honest, brilliant idea. She reached into her briefcase for her grandfather's favorite fountain pen, a beautiful Montblanc he had used to sign the company's founding charter. Its familiar weight was a comfort. But her hand met only empty silk lining. She searched again, a flicker of panic rising in her chest. It was gone. She must have left it on the table. "Stop the car," she commanded the driver. "Turn around. We're going back." As the car executed a smooth U-turn, Elara was just finishing her shift. She had been the one to clear Serafina's table for the final time. Tucked beside the salt shaker, almost invisible against the dark wood, was the pen. It was heavy, exquisitely crafted, clearly an object of immense value, both monetary and sentimental. Her first instinct was to hand it to Marcus, but she hesitated. She pictured him locking it away in the lost and found, where it would sit for weeks, an inert piece of metal. She thought of the woman who had insulted her, the deep unhappiness in her eyes. The pen was a connection, a loose thread. And in her pocket, the folded sketch felt like a weight, an opportunity she couldn't explain. Taking a deep breath, she bypassed the manager's office and walked out the front door, just as the black town car pulled up to the curb. She saw Serafina stepping out, her face etched with worry. Elara walked toward her, holding out the pen. "You forgot this, Miss Vance," she said, her voice quiet but clear. Serafina's relief was immediate and immense. "Oh, thank you. Thank you so much." She took the pen, her fingers brushing Elara's. She looked at the young woman, really looked at her, for the first time. She saw the exhaustion around her eyes, the faint smudge of graphite on her thumb. She saw a person. I want to apologize for my behavior earlier," Serafina said, the words feeling clumsy and unfamiliar. "It was inexcusable. You were having a bad day." Elara replied simply, offering an empathy Serafina knew she didn't deserve. "We all have them." It was then that Elara made her move. It was a terrifying leap of faith. "I also saw this," she said, pulling the folded napkin from her pocket. She held it out. "I know it's not my place, but I think this is what you were looking for." Serafina frowned, confused. She took the small, folded piece of paper. What could a waitress possibly have for her? She unfolded it. And she stopped breathing. There, on the cheap, disposable paper, sketched with a simple pencil, was the soul of her company. The tree, the intertwined letters, the perfect, breathtaking fusion of legacy and future. It was brilliant, It was everything. It was an answer to a prayer she hadn't even known how to utter. All the high-priced consultants, the marketing gurus, the armies of designers, they had all failed. And this girl, this invisible girl in a black uniform, had seen it all in a single glance. Serafina's carefully constructed world tilted on its axis. The sterile boardroom, the meaningless buzzwords, the endless, fruitless meetings, it all seemed like a ridiculous pantomime in the face of this one, pure, perfect idea. She looked up from the napkin, her eyes wide with a dawning, electrifying awe. She saw Elara, no longer as a waitress, no longer as an object of her misplaced anger, but as a lifeline. Where? Serafina's voice was a whisper, filled with a wonder she hadn't felt in years. Where did you get this? Elara's heart was hammering against her ribs, but her voice remained steady. She gestured back toward the restaurant. I saw your papers. I heard your conversation. You said your brand was dying on the vine. She met Serafina's gaze directly. A legacy isn't a monument. It's a garden. It needs tending. It needs to be allowed to grow. The simple, profound wisdom of the statement struck Serafina with the force of a physical blow. A garden. It was so obvious, so true. Her grandfather had been a gardener. It was his favorite hobby. How had she forgotten that? How had the whole company forgotten it? In that moment, the wall between the wealthy CEO and the struggling waitress dissolved into nothing. Serafina saw past the uniform, past the station, and saw the one thing that truly mattered, a rare and extraordinary talent. She saw a mind that worked in ways hers no longer did. She saw clarity. She saw vision. Without hesitation, she reached into her handbag and pulled out a slim, elegant business card case. She extracted a card, its surface a heavy, embossed cream stock. My office, she said, her voice now firm, imbued with a newfound purpose. Tomorrow morning. 9 o'clock sharp. Don't be late. Elara took the card, her fingers trembling slightly as she read the name, Serafina Vance, CEO, Vance Legacy. It felt unreal, a slip of paper from another universe. Serafina got back into her car, her mind racing. She didn't just have a new logo. She had a new perspective. She had found something she thought was lost forever, hope. As the car pulled away, Elara stood on the sidewalk under the golden glow of the streetlights, the business card in one hand and the faint scent of expensive perfume in the air. The world felt different, larger. A door had opened, a door she never even knew existed. She had spent years making herself invisible to survive. Now, for the first time, she had been truly seen. And it changed everything. The next morning, the Vance Legacy Tower loomed over Elara like a monument of glass and steel, a world away from the basement break rooms and sticky tables she was used to. Dressed in her only presentable outfit, a simple dark skirt and a clean, pressed blouse, she clutched her sketchbook to her chest as if it were a shield. The lobby was a cathedral of corporate power, vast and silent, smelling of money and ambition. When she gave her name to the receptionist, the woman's perfectly plucked eyebrow rose in skepticism. Elara? She repeated, scanning her computer screen. You're not in the system. Elara's heart sank. Was this all a mistake? A cruel joke? But then the receptionist's eyes widened slightly. Oh. You're with Ms. Vance personally. Right this way. She was led to a private elevator that whisked her silently to the top floor. The doors opened onto an office so large it felt more like a gallery, with panoramic views of the city sprawling below. Serafina Vance stood by the window, but she was not alone. With her was a man in a flawlessly tailored suit, his silver hair perfectly coiffed, his expression a mixture of impatience and condescension. This was Julian Croft, the executive vice president of marketing, a man who had built his career on protecting the Vance Legacy brand by embalming it. Serafina turned, a warm, genuine smile on her face. Elara. I'm so glad you came. This is Julian Croft, my head of marketing. Julian gave Elara a look that went through her, cataloging her cheap shoes and nervous posture in a fraction of a second. He offered a limp, dismissive handshake. A pleasure, he said, the word utterly devoid of meaning. Serafina has been telling me the most fascinating story. The condescension was thick. She seems to think you've solved all our problems with a doodle on a napkin. The word doodle was designed to wound, to put Alara back in her place. He turned to his boss. Serafina, with all due respect, this is absurd. We have a multi-million-dollar marketing budget, a team of industry experts, and you're bringing in a waitress? He didn't even look at Alara as he said it. Our brand is a legacy, a heritage of bespoke luxury. It is not a charity case or a feel-good publicity stunt. The cynical gatekeeper had revealed himself. Julian represented everything that was wrong with the company: the arrogance, the insularity, the utter disconnect from the real world. He saw Alara's uniform, not her talent. He saw her station, not her soul. Serafina's smile tightened. Julian, I asked Alara here because she had an idea. A better idea than anything your team has produced in the last 2 years. The rebuke was sharp, and Julian's face flushed a deep, angry red. An idea? He scoffed. We presented you with 3 complete branding packages last quarter. They were based on months of research, psychographic profiling, market analysis. They were soulless. Serafina cut in, her voice cold. They were corporate jargon translated into a font. They had no story. Alara, please. She gestured to the enormous mahogany boardroom table. Show us. The boardroom was even more intimidating. A dozen stern-faced board members and executives were already seated, their expressions ranging from curious to openly hostile. Julian had clearly primed them. This was to be his stage, a place to humiliate the interloper and reassert his authority. He smirked at Alara as she walked to the head of the table. The floor is yours, he said, his tone suggesting he was giving her enough rope to hang herself. Alara's hands trembled as she placed her worn sketchbook on the polished wood. It looked so small and out of place in this temple of wealth. She could feel their eyes on her, judging her, dismissing her. She thought of Leo, of his unwavering belief in her. She thought of the quiet dignity she had fought to maintain her whole life. She took a deep breath, and the fear began to recede, replaced by a calm certainty. She wasn't here to impress them with data. She was here to tell them a story. Good morning, she began, her voice barely a whisper, but it carried in the silent room. My name is Alara. I'm not a marketing expert. I don't have a presentation full of charts and graphs. Julian sighed theatrically. I'm a waitress. But I'm also an artist. And what I know is that people don't buy products. They buy stories. She opened her sketchbook. She didn't start with a logo. She started with a sketch of an old man with kind eyes and dirt under his fingernails, standing in a garden. I read about your founder, Serafina's grandfather, she said softly. He wasn't a businessman. He was a craftsman. He started this company in a small workshop, and in his spare time, he was a gardener. He believed that beauty needed roots to grow. That it needed to be nurtured. She turned the page, revealing the first sketch of the tree logo. Your brand has forgotten its roots. This, she said, tapping the old, sharp VL logo on Julian's presentation folder, is a fence. It's defensive. It keeps people out. But a legacy shouldn't be a fortress. It should be a shade tree. It should be strong, welcoming, and alive. She then unrolled a series of larger drawings she had stayed up all night to create. It wasn't just a logo. It was a complete vision. She showed them how the interwoven branches could become a delicate pattern on a silk scarf, how the solid trunk could be embossed onto the leather of a handbag, how the subtle leaf motif could be etched into the crystal of a perfume bottle. She laid out a new color palette, inspired by the natural tones of a garden through the seasons: deep earth, new growth green, autumnal gold. She didn't use words like synergy or brand activation. She used words like honesty, growth, and connection. She explained that the brand story wasn't about being exclusive. It was about creating something so beautiful and well-made that it could be passed down through generations, a legacy in the hands of the people who owned it. She was painting a picture, not just of a brand, but of a feeling. The room was silent, the initial skepticism replaced by a reluctant, growing fascination. They had never heard their company described this way. She wasn't selling a product, she was reintroducing them to their own soul. When she finished, a quiet hush fell over the room. She stood there, vulnerable and exposed, her heart's work laid bare on the table. Julian, seeing his power slipping away, seized the moment to strike. He stood up, clapping slowly, mockingly. "Bravo!" he said, his voice slick with sarcasm. "A very charming fairy tale. Truly heartwarming. But we are not in the business of selling fairy tales. We are in the business of selling $5,000 handbags to a discerning global elite." He clicked a button, and a massive screen behind him lit up with his team's presentation. It was a barrage of data, of analytics, of focus group results. The proposed logos were sleek, minimalist, and utterly generic. They could have been for a car company, a tech firm, or a bank. "This," Julian announced, gesturing to the screen with a flourish, "is a brand for the 21st century. It's bold, it's disruptive, it's digitally native. It's based on what the data tells us our customer wants." The contrast was jarring. Alara's presentation was a poem, Julian's was a legal document. One was about feeling, the other was about demographics. The board members shifted uncomfortably. Julian's pitch was safe, familiar, the kind of thing they always approved. But it felt hollow, especially after what they had just seen. The air grew thick with tension. The soul of Vance's legacy was hanging in the balance, caught between a story and a statistic. A choice had to be made. Serafina Vance had been watching, not the presentations, but the faces of her board members. She saw the flicker of doubt in their eyes as Julian spoke, the way they kept glancing back at Alara's simple, powerful sketches. They felt it too. They felt the truth. She stood up, and the authority in her posture silenced the room. "Thank you, Julian," she said, her voice dangerously calm. "Thank you for showing us exactly what is wrong with this company." Julian's smug expression vanished, replaced by stunned confusion. "For months," Serafina continued, her voice rising with a passion no one in that room had ever heard from her, "you have brought me data, but no heart. You have brought me strategies, but no story. You've used words like disruptive and native to hide the fact that you have absolutely nothing new to say. You've been managing a decline, polishing a tombstone." She turned her gaze to Alara, who stood small but resolute at the head of the table. "This young woman," Serafina's voice softened, filled with a fierce admiration. "This waitress that you were so quick to dismiss, understood in one evening what this entire company has forgotten in a decade. She didn't see a brand, she saw a family's dream. She saw my grandfather's dream." She walked over to the table and picked up Alara's primary logo sketch, holding it up for everyone to see. "This is not a doodle. This is our future. This is our soul, given back to us." She then looked directly at Alara, a brilliant, transformative smile on her face. "We're not offering you an internship, Alara. We're not hiring you as a consultant." She paused, letting the weight of her next words settle in the silent room. "We are offering you a contract. A contract to lead the entire rebranding project as our new creative director." A collective gasp went through the room. Julian's face went pale, then purple with rage. "Serafina, you can't be serious. She has no experience. No qualifications. This is corporate suicide." "No, Julian," Serafina replied, her voice like ice. "Corporate suicide is continuing to listen to people like you who have mistaken a spreadsheet for a soul. The only qualification that matters right now is vision, and she is the only person in this room who has shown any." She turned her back on him completely, a final, brutal dismissal. Her focus was entirely on Alara, whose eyes were wide with shock, tears welling up. "What do you say, Alara? Will you help us find our way back?" Alara looked at the faces around the table, at the defeated rage on Julian's face, and at the hopeful, trusting eyes of Serafina Vance. She thought of her brother, Leo, and the endless sacrifices. She thought of the sketchbook she had hidden for so long. This was it. This was the moment her hidden world and the real world finally merged. With a voice that shook but did not break, she said the one word that would change her life forever. Yes, a lawyer was summoned. A contract was drawn up, its terms more generous than anything Alara could have imagined. As she held the pen, Serafina's grandfather's pen, to sign her name, she felt the weight of her own legacy beginning. The signature on the paper was not just an acceptance of a job, it was an affirmation of her worth, a truth that had been there all along, waiting for someone to see. The transformation of Vance's legacy was swift and breathtaking. Under Alara's direction, the soulless corporation began to rediscover its heart. The new logo was unveiled not at a stuffy press conference, but at a charity event supporting community gardens. The new marketing campaign featured not supermodels, but artisans, craftspeople, and families passing down heirlooms. The story became the brand, and the world responded with overwhelming enthusiasm. Sales skyrocketed, but more than that, the company regained its respect. Alara, the new creative director, thrived. She moved out of her tiny apartment and into a bright, airy loft with a studio for herself and for Leo, whose health began to improve with access to the best care. She was no longer a ghost. She was a force, her ideas shaping the future of a global brand. But she never forgot where she came from. The first major project she greenlit with her new salary was the establishment of the Vance Legacy Foundation for Emerging Artists, a scholarship fund designed to support underprivileged students who, like her, had the talent but not the means. She ensured that other hidden gems would have the chance to shine. One afternoon, several months later, Marcus, the manager from Aurelia, was flipping through a glossy business magazine on his break. He froze. There, on the cover, was a face he recognized. It was Alara. The headline read, "The Waitress Who Saved a Billion-Dollar Brand, How Alara Reyes' Vision Reinvented an Icon." Marcus stared at the photograph, at the confidence and serenity in her eyes. He remembered his own dismissive tone, his sycophantic fawning over Serafina, his utter failure to see the remarkable person right in front of him. He saw her not as a success story to be envied, but as a mirror reflecting his own profound blindness. He slowly closed the magazine. The image of her face burned into his mind, a silent, powerful testament to the value he had so carelessly overlooked. The world is full of people wearing uniforms, performing tasks we take for granted. We look at a janitor, a barista, a cashier, a waitress, and we see their function, not their potential. We see the job, not the soul. The most valuable things in this world are often hidden in the most unlikely places, and the most extraordinary people are often the ones we've trained ourselves not to see. A signature on a contract didn't change who Alara was. It didn't magically grant her talent or vision. It simply revealed the truth that was there all along, waiting in a worn-out sketchbook in a basement break room. Serafina Vance's true genius wasn't in running a company. It was in the moment she chose to stop, to look closer, and to see the person, not the position. The question is not whether people have worth, but whether we have the wisdom to see it. Look around you today. At the office, in the coffee shop, on your commute. Who have you overlooked? Whose hidden genius have you walked right past? Share this story to remind someone that greatness isn't found in a title, but in a soul. And in the comments below, tell us about a time someone saw the potential in you, and how it changed your life. Because one moment of true sight can rewrite the future.